In the heart of Beijing, under clear September skies, more than a decade of steady transformation was placed on public display. What once would have been a domestic pageant for memory and pride has become, many say, a statement of global intent. Over 12,000 troops, new missiles, drones and tanks marched down Chang'an Avenue in a parade that the world watched closely. A spectacle of monumental power, staged on the 80th anniversary of victory in World War II. But the parade's meaning extended beyond the hardware. At Xi Jinping's side were leaders who, until recently, rarely shared a stage with Beijing, Russia as Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Their presence transformed a domestic commemoration into a geopolitical tableau signaling political kinship and a new willingness to coordinate on the world stage. Analysts see the parade as both soft power and hard signaling, a reassurance to domestic audiences and a message to other capitals that China will defend its interests and shape institutions to fit its priorities. That message arrives amid broader moves, institutional initiatives, trade agreements, military drills, and diplomatic summits. Beijing's refrain: multilateralism, sovereign equality. And a multipolar world is now accompanied by concrete proposals: a Shanghai Cooperation Organization Bank, BRICS expansion, and intensified economic ties across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Military parades are theatrical. They compress years of investment into an hour of spectacle. But what the hardware and personnel represent are decades of prioritized defense spending, technology development, and industrial scale. Hypersonic glide vehicles, long-range missiles, and AI-enabled drones, all featured prominently, are not just showpieces. They are capabilities that alter calculations in rival capitals. For Western strategists, these advances raise questions about deterrence, escalation, and the balance of power in Asia and beyond. U.S. intelligence agencies, in classified assessments made public this year, warned that Beijing's growing capacity and its willingness to combine economic statecraft with military modernization gives it unprecedented leverage. If hardware changes what states can do, institutions change how states get what they want. BRICS, the bloc of emerging economies, has been reshaped and expanded this year. New members and new declarations on finance, climate, and technology underscore a shared desire among many countries to rebalance global governance institutions long dominated by the West. From talk of alternate payment mechanisms to demands for IMF and World Bank reforms, the BRICS agenda is less about an immediate replacement of the dollar than it is about creating options. Corridors of trade and finance that reduce vulnerability to unilateral sanctions and enhance bargaining power for the global South. Experts caution, however, that a full replacement of existing systems would require deep political and fiscal alignment, a slow, fraught process. Alongside institutional work, another pattern has caught attention: increasing operational cooperation among Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang, sometimes shorthand called CRINK. These states, despite different interests and levels of power, are finding transactional ways to help each other, economically, diplomatically, and in some cases, militarily, particularly when sanctioned by the West. China's economic ties to Iran, especially in energy, have deepened. Its relationship with Russia now includes joint naval exercises and growing trade ties that help Moscow circumvent sanctions. North Korea's cooperation with Russia and its recent international appearances, alongside Beijing and Moscow, signal a normalization of diplomatic intimacy between the most unexpected partners. Yet analysts stress this is not a monolithic alliance. Mistrust, competing regional ambitions, and uneven economic complementarities make the grouping fragile and transactional. For Washington and its allies, the question is not whether China is powerful, it is, but how best to respond. Policy options range from deterrence to engagement, from alliances and capability investments to competitive economic policies aimed at limiting the spread of sensitive technology. The U.S. intelligence community has framed the growing convergence of authoritarian powers as one of the principal national security challenges of our time. Some Western leaders see the parade and Xi's diplomatic push as performative posturing. Others see a strategic pivot requiring new investments in alliances and technology. Whatever the interpretation, the result is changed dynamics. More diplomatic maneuvering in the global South. New trade routes and financial institutions to rival Western-dominated ones. And more complex calculations for regional crises from Taiwan to the Middle East. For many states in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, the rise of alternatives is an opening. Better deals on infrastructure, technology, and finance. Less conditionality on governance. And more bargaining power between major powers. BRICS' rhetoric of sustainable reglobalization and its commitments to climate and AI cooperation are pitched precisely to those governments seeking more agency. But critics warn of the long-term trade-offs. Debt traps, opaque contracts, and political strings attached. For many leaders in the global South, the question is pragmatic. Which partner delivers infrastructure, investment, and technology most reliably, and at what political cost? China's rise is real, but it is not without limits. Economic growth faces demographic headwinds and structural challenges. Political models that work domestically may meet resistance internationally. And while China's alignment with Russia, Iran, and North Korea offers strategic depth, it also ties Beijing to actors whose pariah status can complicate relationships with many partners. Analysts emphasize that the cohesion of any anti-Western bloc is tenuous, shaped by transactional interests more than ideological unanimity. And yet, even if the world does not pivot overnight into a single China-led order, we are witnessing a reconfiguration. Institutions, alliances, and practices that reduce the singular dominance of any single power, especially in finance and technology. The outcome is likely to be a more contested, multipolar world, one where rules are negotiated more frequently and where states, big and small, must navigate more complex strategic choices. Is China rewriting the global playbook? It has certainly turned many pages. Whether those pages become a new script, a parallel volume, or just a chapter in an evolving story depends not only on Beijing's ambitions, but on how other powers respond, with alliances, institutions, policies, and diplomacy. The next decade will tell which rules hold, which are rewritten, and who writes the footnotes. Thanks for watching.